Hey, my name is Lucy,
And I'm Kevin.
and we're students at MSU here in Bozeman.
We're here today with Jared Pettinato, a Democratic candidate for the 2018 congressional race.
We'll be conducting these interviews with each House candidate for the 2018 primaries who has agreed to participate.
Each candidate will be asked the same set of 8 questions.
Jared, are you ready to get started?
I'm ready. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. Many of our staff and volunteers are LGBTQ and trans. Do you support the expansion of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act to include sexual orientation and gender expression as protected classes? Why or why not?
I do. For me, this is a rule of law issue, it's an equal protection issue, and it's a civil rights issue. This is treating everybody the same unless you have a good reason for treating them differently. And that's just a basic tenet of Supreme Court law. It's from procedural due process and from equal protection. And we've seen the Supreme Court move in that direction as well over time and recognize gay marriage. And I think it's time that we move forward in all the directions to make sure that we ensure equal rights to everyone.
Perfect.
Cool. So high schoolers and college students around the country have been organizing marches and walkouts. Do you support closing loopholes in federal law that allow the sale of firearms without a background check? That could include gun shows and online purchases. And why or why not?
Gun rights in Montana are a pretty hot issue, as I'm sure you guys all know. We value our freedoms and our freedoms to own guns, but we, at the same time, the shootings in Parkland just broke my heart, and I hated to see it and to see the kids talk about the horrors that they are suffering. So we need to balance the freedom to own guns and firearms against the freedom to go to school without fear and the freedom to send your kids to school without fear. And it gets really pretty sticky in trying to tease a lot of these things out. So I actually went to a class on gun laws so that I could understand what we have in place and see how we could find a path forward. And I've been hearing a lot of things from a lot of people, and so it gets a little complicated, but I think we need several steps. The first thing, we need to enforce the laws that we have. We're not doing that. We saw that in Texas. We saw that in Florida. They're not reporting to the background check system. So then we can't keep them out of the hands of bad people. We need to stop repealing the laws that we have, which we've been doing in the States. We saw even last year, Congress repealed a regulation that would have made it harder for people with mental disabilities to obtain firearms. So that's the wrong direction. And so we need to ban bump stocks because they're basically machine guns, which are already basically outlawed. And I've heard a lot of people that say, we want to keep firearms out of the hands of terrorists and criminals and people with mental disabilities. And there's really not a way to do that without background checks, without some system in place to keep them out of the hands of those people. And 40% of the sales in Montana, for example, don't go through the regular background check system. So we need to close some of those holes so we can try to tighten them up and make people just safer, make sure we keep the hands out of the people, out of the wrong hands. Keep the firearms out of the people with the wrong hands.
For sure.
What is your stance on a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants who were brought to the United States as children, also known as dreamers?
Exactly. These are dreamers. These are people that were too young to make the decision on their own. They didn't come here in violation of any law or in contradiction of any regulation or anything like that. Their parents brought them here, so they are not responsible for their reason for being in America. And then a lot of these dreamers have been contributing to America in the meantime. They've been working, they've been doing their best and pitching in for America. And as I see it, if you're here and you're in America and you're pitching in and you're not responsible for your being here, we need to find you a path to citizenship and find you a way so that you can be part of our community, because you're already part of our community. And we need to include you and give you a way so that you can have all of the rights of citizenship that the rest of us enjoy.
Thank you. So Montanans love public lands, and we obviously hope to pass that along our wilderness areas to our kids, just like our parents did for us. So how do you feel about opening more areas of land for oil and gas drilling?
Congressman Greg Gianforte, at every opportunity, has sought to undermine public lands protections. He sought to undermine the Wilderness Act, the Antiquities Act, and the Wilderness Study Acts here in Montana. I served for 9 years at the U.S. Department of Justice, defending public lands here in Montana and throughout the U.S. And in part, one of the projects I got to work on was here in Montana. I defended the Montana Wilderness Study Act, and the courts now use my interpretation of that act to protect our public lands. So I defended Forest Service projects on the Gallatin, the Beaverhead Deer Lodge, the Lewis and Clark, and the Helena. And so I've seen what this oil and gas drilling can do and how it can spoil what is a valuable resource here in Montana. We have a $7.1 billion public lands economy here in Montana, and if we let the oil and gas get out of control, it's like killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. We need to keep our clean water. We need to stop the pollution in our national forests and keep the lands protected the way that we have been protecting them. And in a lot of situations, that just helps us segregate uses so that we can have all of the uses that we all want and have our own experience that we want from the national forests.
Okay. This next question's a little goofy. Can you tell me 2 truths and a lie about yourself, and I'll guess the lie?
All right, Liz, you up for this?
I don't know. We'll see how good I am. I'm not really good at this even with my closest friends, so we'll see.
All right. Let's go with these. I'm the only candidate in the race born and raised in Montana. I'm from Whitefish. I earned my political science degree from the University of Montana, and I went to Stanford for law school.
Is the lie the University of Montana one?
Why do you say that? You're right, but
okay.
do you say that?
I don't know. I felt
You're better at that than I thought.
I just go with the second one, I guess, all the time. But yeah, maybe trying to poke some fun at us Montana State folk. That's my guess. My thought right there, I guess. I don't know.
I was pretty subtle with that one.
Okay.
I minored in political science.
Oh.
I majored in math.
At University of Montana, though?
At the University of Montana.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
it was
still
only
trying to...
slightly false.
Okay. Still trying to poke fun at us Montana State people, but it's okay.
My brother went here.
Okay, there you go. That's good.
My mom went here. Like, I've got some bobcats in my family.
There you go. Okay.
All right. So next question. Can you tell me about your stance on a federal minimum wage of $15, and why do you feel that way?
Wages are not high enough. And that's causing a lot of the problems that we're seeing. It's causing healthcare. It's causing all healthcare problems. It's causing all sorts of problems because our wages are not rising, and healthcare costs are rising. We've got all these needs that are unmet. Even when it comes to food and shelter, we've got housing crises here in MSU, here in Bozeman and Missoula and across the state. And these costs are all rising, and people's wages are just not keeping up. So this is one of the benefits of capitalism. One of the benefits of capitalism comes from reducing price to marginal cost. It makes things cheaper because you can always find some other place to go get the same thing for less price. So it introduces that competition. It's really useful for bricks and cars and when you're trying to buy chairs and things like that. It's less useful for human capital, which is 70% of the cost of building things, because it pushes wages down to survival wages. And so there's only a few ways to push up on wages. We can increase the minimum wage. We can increase demand for jobs and employment, and then we can expand and encourage and build stronger unions. Those are the only 3 ways that I've seen to raise wages, and we need to do all of them. We need to increase the minimum wage. I've got some ideas with the wind in the trees for expanding jobs here in Montana, which will increase demand, and that will raise price according to economics. And we need to expand unions because corporations already have collective bargaining units. They are the collective bargaining unit for the shareholders. And so then they get to divide and conquer workers, and that's how this works. As far as, just to answer your question directly, as far as $15 an hour, I've been hearing that that's a little high in Montana. I think from the people I've been talking to, there aren't any jobs in Montana at the federal minimum wage. There aren't any jobs even at the Montana minimum wage. Everybody has to pay everybody a higher wage than that. But we still want to push up on that so that people can like survive on their wages. I also see an opportunity here for separating out some minimum wage jobs. If you're starting to get a minimum wage or a living wage for people, then maybe the high schoolers don't need a living wage. Maybe they can get some experience and maybe have more opportunities if we set them a lower minimum wage that they could have different jobs. So I see a lot of opportunities and a lot of pieces to work here to try to lift up people's wages and also to try to expand high schoolers' opportunities to work.
As of 2017, there were 5,952 Montana students enrolled in 25 TRIO programs across the state. Do you support allocating federal funding for TRIO, which offers support for marginalized students enrolled in post-secondary education?
We make no better investment in America than investing in our human capital, in our people, in our students, so that they are more capable and more able to earn more money, more able to make better financial decisions for themselves, and better able to participate in our democracy. Those are our best investments that we can make. And TRIO especially, I think, has some advantages over some of the other places where we might put our money, because it helps, as you know, no doubt, it helps disadvantaged students and students with who are first-generation college students, and helps them lift them up and help them find their way through college, which can be a bit of a daunting experience for someone who's never done it and doesn't have a support system to help them through it. So I see this as investing in our human capital, and also I see it allowing us to encourage and take advantage of a resource that would otherwise remain dormant. And that's the resource of all of these people who would have such a hard time getting through college if it weren't for TRIO. And so if you take all those people who are disadvantaged and are first generation, and you take TRIO away, they wouldn't be able to accomplish what they could accomplish with this. And so the United States and Montana, we gain the benefit of having that resource, those people, and developing their skills so that we can encourage them to use those skills to their maximum potential. And that grows Montana, it grows the United States, and the benefits that we get from those people far outweighs the small cost that we invest in TRIO.
Cool. And so this is our last question. Do you support providing free college tuition to two-year community colleges? And if not, what thoughts would you have on addressing the rising cost of tuition and student debt?
I'm open to that. I'm open to the free college. I need to take a harder look at the money and the figures and figure out how much it would cost and where we're going to get the money from to do something like that. Of course, the people who go to even those community colleges come out ahead in the long run when they invest in their own education and when they have the student loans available to help them access that education. So I'm open to it. I haven't quite made any final determinations on that one yet. As far as other opportunities, we've seen college prices go up and up and up, and that's happened because states often are slowly dialing back on the amount that they contribute to education, to higher education in particular, to the university systems. So I think there's some opportunities for encouraging them to do more of that. And then what they've really done is taken those burdens of higher education from the taxpayers in the states and put them onto the students themselves so that they would take out loans and then pay for their own education. But then we start charging them 8% interest on those student loans. And I find that absolutely ludicrous because, again, that's our best place to invest in our students. And these students are literally investing in their ability to make more money. And then they can't discharge these loans in bankruptcy. So the banks are just making out like bandits when it comes to student loans. And that I find that ridiculous because that's not the place for them to make their money, on the backs of students and by suppressing people who could otherwise take all of that income and invest it in their lives, invest it in their economy, later on in life invest it in housing, and have more money around. So I want to bring the interest rates on student loans down to maybe 1% above the Treasury rate, or maybe to the Treasury rate, because they're such secure loans and you're literally investing in people to make more money. Like that's a great investment if you're a bank. So I think those are a couple of ideas we could use. I also want to expand trade schools here in Montana because we have a lot of opportunities for growing that other resource, and there's a lot of demand for those skills, and people are not available to meet those skills. So I think we have a few other things to do before I think we get to free college tuition for 2-year colleges, but I think we can get there eventually, and I'm open to it, and I look forward to working with people to get there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, definitely.